Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Let me get my lights turned on here. Okay, so this is Sarah with Harrisburg Project. I don't think I have done an afternoon training in quite a long time. I'm so used to saying good morning, so good afternoon. I hope everybody is having a good day and a good week so far. Today, we're going to go over Indicator 11 and Fund You, the relationship that they share, the reason that we have Fund You, those kinds of things. We're not going to touch on Fund In today. So if you have questions about Fund In, please reach out and let us know. The reason that I don't talk about them a lot in a webinar setting is because we don't have a lot of fund code in locations throughout the state. So not that it isn't important to some people, but that requires some things like parochial schools, lots of service plan kids and those kinds of things. So it's not that I'm saying it's uncommon at all. It's just not as widespread as Fund You. So if you have questions about Fund In, please let us know. We're happy to help you with those. So I've had a couple questions about where the handout is. It's in your GoToWebinar menu. If you don't see your menu, you should see a small orange arrow pointing to the left. Just click on that. It should open up your menu and you should see that handout. So that's your PDF for today. If you've attended this in the past, everything will be very similar to today. I may have some more things to add just because I do learn something every year, it seems, about just any topic that we go through. And maybe sometimes things just click a little better to me from year to year. So I may have some new things to add. But overall, this is nothing new as far as any collections or additions to our approval instructions or anything like that. So this is just a training I like to do to explain to you the correlation between those two pieces of data. So if you have questions throughout the session, please just ask them in the questions pod. I will answer those throughout the session or as we get to those areas in the notes. So we will go ahead and get started. And so what we're going to talk about today is going to be what is Indicator 11. So if you aren't familiar with that, you know it's just something you have to do as you're going through your process of data entry. We'll go over that, how it's collected in the iStar system, and kind of why we do that. And then we'll talk about Fund Code U, why we have it, what we use it for, how long you keep it in iStar, what is the purpose of collecting these records? Why do we do this? Because we know these kids aren't receiving services. So why do we do this? When should you make them? And where can you find reports on these indicators toward the end of the school year? So I'm going to try to touch on a lot of different pieces because right now, some of you are not aware, some of you are very aware that Indicator 11 is a compliance indicator. And so we have just recently had the LEA determinations sent out by ISB. And Indicator 11 is one of those determinations that is used to grade your district overall. So if you are in a process where you're working with needs intervention or anything like that for your LEAs, determinations, then this is something that would be very beneficial to you today. But I'm going to try to bring in some areas of that as well as we go through. So if you've had to work on Indicator 11 or if you need to work on it, anything like that, or just to prevent you from getting in that position, we'll try to talk about some things about LEA determinations as well. So what are LEA determinations? Essentially, excuse me, it is the report of all the state performance plan indicators that either are results-based, compliance-based. They give you, kind of a report of this is how it went. But some districts will score so, low in certain areas that if they have 3 or more, then they will start to have needs intervention meetings with the state throughout the school year to try to improve those plans. And so Indicator 11 is one of the biggest ones that will be a part of that. Not always, but sometimes it can be one of the 3 indicators that may get you in that position. Now, there are different tiers and things like that that you go through for this, but that's, the basic idea of why this is so important. So, tracking your data is important, accurately tracking your data is important, but also sometimes just keeping a little extra eye on it. So I'm going to try to point out some of those areas where you can be looking as well. And definitely want to make sure we're not making mistakes, so we don't want some type of mistake between translation to affect your district as a whole. So Indicator 11 essentially measures the percentage of students with initial parental consent to evaluate. So initials only is what we will be reporting for this data. So if you do an evaluation on a student that already has an IEP, we don't want to record the data for this, okay? So that's the distinction there. They also have had their meeting, and we want to know if that occurred in 60 school days or less. So the 60 school days is going to be determined based on your public calendar that your district superintendent submits each year. So we're looking at that actual official calendar to calculate those number of school days. So it does become important toward the end of the school year that you make sure your superintendents are aware of how much you're relying on those calendars, and that they make sure that they are amending and finalizing their calendars in an appropriate time at the end of the school year. So the evaluating district is always going to be the resident district. So if you're responsible for that child's education, then obviously you're going to be entering data on their behalf. So we do this for any students that come into the system. All right, so if you've had an initial, you've done an initial on a child, then we're going to start collecting that data, because you're going to be putting them into iStar maybe. That's where FundU comes in. So you do an initial on a student, and then we're going to decide what would their fund code be. And the first thing will be, are they receiving services or not? Okay, so that's the first thing we're going to decide. But regardless, we need to know, if you did an initial on them, what was their indicator 11 status? So you would report, I'm the evaluating district. Okay, if it's a parochial school child and they're going to a parochial school that is inside your district's jurisdiction, you are responsible for them. Even if they reside in Harrisburg, at that point you become responsible for that child. So under all other circumstances and situations, with maybe some exceptions that ISB, has laid out, but for the most part, you are always responsible for the students that reside in your district. But there is an exception to that rule if you have a parochial school in your district as well. So if you have parochial schools and special ed students there, you're responsible for their education and their testing. So sometimes we're going to have these parentally placed kids as well. So indicator 11 data is required for all students that you put into iStar. So you're probably thinking, well, what if I don't know this information? Or what if I didn't do the initial? What if they just transferred to me? So we're going to show what you do under all those circumstances, but you do have to address it for each student you put in the system. So if you don't do that, so if you leave it blank because you didn't do the initial and you don't know what to do, so you just leave it blank, it's going to create an error on your approval record in its entirety. So we won't be counting that record. So we want to make sure that if you have an indicator 11 error, that if you don't know how to fix it, you call us and get some help, or send us an email and we'll tell you what to do. We may have a couple questions for you. Did you do the initial? Did another district do the initial? And we'll be able to help you clear it up really quickly, okay? But you have to address it for all students that you put into iStar. So there are 3 reason codes that you can use to avoid errors that we just talked about if you did not perform the student's initial. So you have a student that enrolled in your district yesterday, they came with their IEP, they're going to start receiving services, and you need to put them in iStar on behalf of your district. They need to be in the system. Maybe they're going to be a Fund Code A student. You already know all those things. You're serving them. You need to put them into iStar. So you're going to create an approval record for them since they're new to you. You're going to add all their information on that approval record. And when you hit save and check errors at the bottom, you're more than likely going to get an error message that says indicator 11 has not been completed for this student. So you're thinking, I did not do this initial. I don't have that data. I don't, that is not something that we would be collecting because the child wasn't here yet. All of those unknowns. So in those circumstances, you have 3 reasons that you can use for why this student is not applicable to indicator 11 collection for your district on this record. So you don't need to provide indicator 11 data because you did not perform their initial in this school year. Okay, so they've come in with their IEP already. It's not an initial. So the most common will be the 02. The determination was completed when the student was at another district. So you would not provide data. You're not going to provide a date of a meeting, a date of a consent, a calendar, anything. You're just going to say, this does not apply to my district because the student was in another district for their initial, or we did not do their initial this school year, okay? So there could be a circumstance where maybe you have kids that move in and out. So maybe you had this kid 5 years ago and you did do their initial, but we have to remember, we want to know about meetings you're performing in this school year, okay? So keep that in mind, that the collection in each year, anything you put in for indicator 11, we're going to be looking for dates that occurred during the school year. All right. So that's why we will let you, but there is no need for you to go in and look at every student's indicator 11 record and put in their meeting dates from their initials. Okay. We only want to know about things that occur, initials that occur this school year by your district. Okay. So that's what you do when kids come into you. All right. You're just going to say, for some reason, this doesn't apply. And even though there are 2 other reasons, I will tell you 02 is the most common. So you're done with that. That will eliminate your error and you can move on. Now, let's go to the other side, that this is a new student to you and that you have completed their initial and they are going to possibly start receiving services. We'll get to that shortly. But what would you do if you did perform the initial and you need to report this data for collection? So the first thing is an initial would be held. Regardless of the outcome, you're going to create an approval record. And for a public student, if they don't receive services for some reason, we're going to make them a fund code U. Okay. If they do receive services, that's easy. You're used to that. So they're going to be fund code A, okay, or fund code E. But you're used to making those types of decisions. What we're going to determine here is the child going to receive services or not? That's going to be your first question. So we're going to take in this example that the child is not receiving services. Okay, you did an initial. ISB needs to know that you did that because they want to know, did you get that done in 60 school days, regardless of the outcome? So this time we're going to go with a fund U. Now, for non-public kids, it's fund N. So if you have parochial kids that are on service, going to be on a service plan or anything like that, if you evaluate them, even if you end up writing them an IEP, but if they were parochial kids at the time, then they're going to be fund N. Okay. So fund code U is going to be used for students who have had their initial evaluation, have had their eligibility determined, and are not receiving services. So remember, we're going with the fund U right now. They're not receiving services, but they have had an initial and held the meeting. So when you create a fund code U, you're going to also tell a reason that the student is not receiving services. So the first one's the easy one. The student's not eligible. Okay, so if the student isn't eligible, you're going to create this fund code U record. And at the end of the school year, it's going to, all of these will automatically put in an end date of 7/31. And during the rollover, we're not going to bring those students over into the new year. So it's 1 year. They were not eligible. ISB will pick that data up for the school year. And then after that, we're done with them. So in the new year, next year, so what's 20, oh my gosh, 24, 25, we're not going to be worried about those kinds of students anymore. Okay, if they come back and you do something with them later, that's fine, but we're not going to be worried about them if they're not eligible. Okay, next, student is eligible but parent refused services. So as long as they remained enrolled in your public district or a public district for the rest of the school year, then they would be a reason 02. And you're just going to let those students also roll out at the end of the year because we're not concerned about those. If they're eligible, but they're still in your public district, they can come back at any time and get the services, okay? They're public kids, so, they may want to come back, they may not, they may do something else. All right, so 3's missing, as you can see, because it doesn't apply to fund code U, so we can't use number 3 for fund code U. So we're going from 2 to 4. This is when a student is eligible, but they're pending placement. So you could use this during the school year, but the most common scenario for this would be if the student is evaluated at the end of the school year, and let's say that they're 2 years old, and it's towards the end of the school year, and even though they're eligible, the parent doesn't want to start them until the new year, okay? But before the school year's over, the student will turn 3, but the parent still wants to wait, start fresh at the beginning of the new year. So in those circumstances, we need to know the consent and meeting date, the year that it is completed. So we need to know in that current school year. So we need that Fund Code U record for those kids. We need to know that you did their initial, maybe in the spring of a school year, and that even though the student is going to turn 3 before the end of that year, they're not going to take the services yet, okay? So when you have those kids that may turn 3 at the end of the year, but still are not going to start till the new year, we need a Fund Code U so we can grab that data from that meeting in the current school year. If you don't put a Fund Code U in, then that student possibly wouldn't go in until the next school year, maybe as a Fund A in pre-K. But if those dates were in a previous year, they're not going to get counted for you. Okay, so we got to make sure that when we're doing initials that we're putting in a record for these kids in the year where the initial occurred, whether they receive services or whether they don't and are going to in the future. So if you know that they're pending placement, even though they're going to turn 3 in time for spring services, we want to use a 04 and make sure that you're putting them in as a Fund U. The next one's going to be for kids, same idea, but they can't receive services at the end of the school year because they aren't going to be 3 yet. So they're maybe going to turn 3 over the summer and start in the fall, okay? You have to have a student information system ID for these kids. So you have to have a SIS ID for these students to be in iStar. If you do not know how to do that, SIS Help Desk can walk you through that. And I will tell you that students under the age of 3 can get SIS IDs. So their grade level will be evaluated, and that is the mechanism that allows you to get those IDs for them before their 3rd birthday. So that is not a roadblock that maybe once was long ago, but it is not now. So you can get those. I just know that when some people go ask for that and they don't manage SIS as well, just iStar, sometimes that's exactly what you'll be told is that you cannot do that, and that is not correct. So I'm trying to save you a trip back to me. You can get those, again, grade level evaluated. All right, so once you have created your approval record, and I know that I've just been giving you steps, so here's a picture of what it looks like. I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to go down through this because I know it's hard for me to I feel like I lose my train of thought if I don't put my steps together, and, and then show you a picture. So this is where you're going to do your Fund Code U, resident district and school. This is, who did the evaluation, where would the child go if they were going to receive services, or actually, even if they weren't going to receive services, what is their resident school? So where would they normally go? The serving district, who performed the meeting in our neck of the woods. Our co-ops perform most of our meetings, so that's why I have them as the serving district in this circumstance. Reason for no service. This one, student is not eligible, and you can see that with our begin date, this is the date the meeting occurred. The end date will automatically default with an exit of 22 that tells you it's preventing it from rolling over. So for Fund Code U, does that include high school students who are awaiting out placement? Yes, if they're pending a placement and they had an initial, then yes. But if they are high school students that have been receiving services for, maybe you did a re-eval on them, then we're not going to be creating Fund Code U records for them. Okay, we only want to know initials that you do. So in our system, the only way that ISBE can get any data from you is if there is an approval record. And the only way to have an approval record is if it has a fund code. It's the most important piece of that approval record. So we have to have that. And so the Fund U allows us to carry data into ISBE even though the child may not be receiving services. Maybe they won't yet, maybe they won't at all. But if you have high school kids that you did an initial on and they're pending placement for some reason, then yes, you would want a Fund U. I know that sometimes you have high school kids that get initials, but it would seem more common that they're awaiting a new placement from a reeval. So just be careful that you're not putting these in for reevals or annual reviews just because they're pending placement. Okay. All right. There are links in 2 different spots for indicator 11 and 13, as you can see, but we're talking about 11 today. So if you create an approval record for a student and then you want to click from the approval record into indicator 11, you can complete the process there. If you've already been out of the system and you need to come back in, you can search for your student and it will be in the search results. So either way, it's really just going to depend on where you're at in the process when you're entering that. So again, if you've come out of the system to come back in, that may be faster, but if you're already on the record, you can use those buttons, which are fairly new and everybody seems to love. So, all right. So did you know? So we talked about this earlier, but here's a pretty picture of it all. We're only, again, taking dates for the current school year that were completed for initials. So again, if there's any reason that you need to fill out the data, then do so. But otherwise, if you put new students in and you didn't do their initial, this is how you do the bypass to avoid the error message. So you skip everything up here at the top and you go down here to the bottom and you just say, this is the reason it's not applicable. So you would click on your 11, add in a new record, come to the bottom, save it. You're good. You're not going to have an error message anymore. The reason I show this first, even though we're talking about indicator 11 and all the details of that, but the reason I show this first is because the majority of the time, this is what a client is missing when they're calling us and they can't figure out why they've got this error. Okay. All right. Next question. Fund Code U is also for early intervention children who were evaluated and not eligible for an IEP. So if you were doing an initial evaluation for an IEP for a student and they were not eligible in this school year, then yes, you will create a Fund Code U record with reason 01, student is not eligible, and it would just last for this school year and then it would drop off during rollover next year. All right. So that's how you bypass when you did not do the initial. Now, this is when you did do the initial. You've added in your Fund Code U record for your student for whatever reason you need to. So they're not eligible, they're pending placement, they weren't 2 yet pending placement. So we're going to look at those and tell you you need to fill out indicator 11 for these students. And so when you should fill out the data, then you will click on that indicator 11 button, you'll hit add, and then you will provide the data. So when was the consent signed? What was the date of the meeting? Under evaluating district, you're going to select your calendar. If you're a co-op and you enter data for 15 districts, then obviously you're going to select the district that you're working with. And then you're going to hit recalculate for the number of days. When you do that, the system will look over to see at your public calendar. Based on that, is this, what are the days? And then on top of that, are the days coming out to more than 60 days? So if it exceeds 60 days, then the text here will turn red. And you will also have to give a reason why your district did not meet the timeline. So this is what a compliant record looks like. You had your meeting this year on August 22nd, or I'm sorry, you had your consent signed on August 22nd. Your meeting was on September 12th. Harrisburg was the evaluating district, and based on their current year calendar, that took 14 school days to complete. Everything is fine. We're in compliance as far as that meeting goes. Now, a lot of questions, I always have a lot of questions about little kids, the littles, and I know sometimes this happens on the same day. That's fine. Just put in the same date. So if they came in on August 22nd and the parent signed and you did the screening, or I'm sorry, you had the meeting and everything right then, the evaluation, that's fine. Again, you can just put in the same date for both. And of course, you're well under 60 days on that, so don't worry about that, but I do have that question a lot. So next, this is an example of what it would look like if we went over. So we're not that far into the school year yet, so you've got time, but I had to put the date in the future. So it does look a little funny right now since we're not to that date yet, but I wanted you to be able to see that the number of school days exceeded 60 here. So 61 days, it's in red. And at that point, you will get another message if you try to save and get out of this, because ISBE wants to know, why was the timeline not met? So what do you do at that point? Well, you have to go to the drop down and select one of the reasons why that timeline was not met. And in your approval instructions, there are acceptable timeline exceptions for compliance. So what does that mean? That means that, yes, you did exceed the 60 school days, but the reasons will keep you in compliance with ISBE when it comes to these LEA determinations that come out. So in other words, the parent didn't deliver the student. You can't help that, okay? The district cannot help that. They cannot be held responsible if a parent does not deliver the student in time for the meeting. They went to another district after the consent was received in another district, but before eligibility could be determined, parents' unavailability, or if you did for your SLD kids have an extension that was agreed on. So these things will keep you in compliance, all right? But next, these will be the ones that will get you into a finding of non-compliance. So lack of personnel, district was unable, district failure, those kinds of things. So 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8 are going to be reasons for a non-compliance finding for this particular indicator. All right. What happens when the dates are reported in the next school year? Okay, so if you should have put some fund code U kids in at the end of last school year and you didn't get it done, then you just missed it, okay? So nothing happens if you put them in this year. All right. So where can you find reports on this in iStar? So the first one is going to be under student approvals. Indicator 11 report by resident district. And so what you should do when you're looking at this, I would recommend that you keep an eye on this throughout the school year, but most importantly at the end of the school year and towards summer, because we're going to be collecting this data this year. It's actually been moved and it's going to be collected on July 15th. So it's due July 15th this school year. So we're trying to make corrections anywhere that we have a different date on that, but that is the new date, July 15th. So they're going to pick up data for 11 and 13 for those indicators this year on that date. So what do you do with this report? You're going to look at this report. You're going to go down on the very far right, and it will give you for each student that has had an indicator entered in this school year, it will show you if they exceeded the 60 school days. So you'll see your number of school days out there on the far right-hand column. And what you want to do is scan through that and make sure that you don't have any days over 60. But if you do, then you want to look at your reason why, or you want to see, was it a mistake? Do we have a clerical mistake that we need to go back and fix? So that's what you can do to be prepared for LEA determinations next year. And so you would just run that report again and view down through there, look for days over 60. If they have a non-compliant reason, if that's just the case and it's the truth and there's nothing you can do about it, that's fine, but at least you've checked it and you will know, and maybe you can give someone a heads up that's going to get these emails. So the LEA determination emails go to your district superintendent and your state approved special ed director. So it wouldn't hurt when you're looking at this to be like, hey, I found this, I just want to let you know, those kinds of things. Next, you can look at errors. Of course, we're going to be reminding you about these errors a lot. If it affects a fund code or an approval, like the December 1 child count. If you have an error on this and it affects December 1 child count, we'll of course be sending you messages. Okay, but we're always going to be sending you emails, typically on the errors that are going to be focused on a data collection. So it doesn't mean we're sending you every error in your system just because we email you sometimes. So right now we're emailing on summer term orphanage. We're not emailing you on any other errors, okay? So what you have to do is make sure that you are looking at your error reports for your indicators, also, of course, for your approvals and claims at times, you know, not every day, but you do want to look at your approval report once in a while and look at those approval errors overall. So those are the reports that are available to you. I'm trying to think of anything that I kind of didn't talk about. I know that I got in about your pre-K kids, your young kids, making sure that you understand that the dates that you report are going to be important based on the school year that you perform these meetings in. I can't emphasize that enough. So it is very important to make sure you're getting those Fund Code U kids in. Even if they're going to come to you next year, make sure you're doing that. And so try to remember that, since you're probably going to sleep a few times until spring. But that's one of the biggest things. Another thing is that if you put students in like that, so you put in the pre-K kids, they are going to roll into the new year automatically if it says they're pending placement or not of eligible age. So we're going to roll those over for you. So all you have to do in the new year is you know, just make sure that the data that is on the record is accurate. So we'll roll them over. They'll become a Fund Code A automatically by default. So you don't have to remember that these kids are in that year and then re-add them in the new year. So if it appears that they're going to come back to you, then they will roll over and again, automatically be a Fund A, and you will be good to go. So some of you have run into this before because maybe you had already taken care of that, but the system will roll those automatically, and it really helps the districts to keep track of these kids. And if they didn't show back up, it's kind of like, where did they go? So it makes them know, you know, maybe we need to delete the kid and, you know, provide some exit data or, you know, different things like that. So it does help with tracking a little bit, but those kids will roll over. Okay, I will take any more questions that anyone has. Please, if you think of something after the session, feel free to send us an email or give us a call. We're happy to help with that. Let's see. Okay, so I'll do my best to explain the calculations method without looking, but I'm probably going to have to look at the manual. So there are 6 scenarios for the day calculation. Some of them are pretty straightforward. Some of them are not. So, it's mad at me. Sorry. Okay, Lordy. All right, so our approval instructions. I'm just going to go ahead and pull them up because I know I'm going to need them. Okay, while I'm waiting, if you missed entering Fund Code U kids last year, there's no point in adding them this year. We're not going to collect that data if those dates were in the previous year. Okay. Timelines. Okay. So the first several are easy. I mean, if it's within the school year, it's just strictly looking at the calendar dates. Okay, so those are not going to be a big deal. Now, there are other ones that will depend upon whether or not the consent was received within the last 60 school days of the school year and then when the meeting was held. And so each of these are going to kind of go down through that. So I'll do my best to explain these. All right. Yeah, if it's in the last 60 days of the school year, then the number is going to be reported as the number of school days between the consent date and the meeting date. If it's in the last 60 days of the school year and the determination meeting is on or before, I think this is what you guys get into. So you've had the meeting at the end of the school year within the last 60 days, then you have the meeting on or before the first day of the next school year. Then the number of days will be reported as the number of days between the consent date and the last day of the school year. So let's put an example out there. That's a lot of words. So if you have a meeting, say June 5th was your last school day, and you had a meeting May 15th. So that's the last 60 days of school. And the meeting was July 1st. Then what they would do is they would start at May 15th, they would count to your end date of June 5th, and the number of school days would be reported as the number between May 15th and June 5th. Okay? But that's when, if it's within those last 60 school days and you do the meeting the second day of school, then it will take the number, I want to make sure, it will take, after the number of school days will be reported as an automatic 60 plus the number of days from the first day of school to the day of the meeting. Yeah. So in my example, that same thing, May 15th, it was signed, but the second day of school is when you did the meeting. It's going to be reported as 61. Okay. All right. Then if the consent is not within the last 60 school days, so let's go back to, let's be safe, let's say it was in February, okay? And then the meeting was after the first day of the next school year, then, so that would be this year. So if you did the meeting or had the consent in last February and you did the meeting this school year, then it's going to take the days in last school year plus the days in this school year, and that's what your number will be. I think I got all of them. Within. I think I got all of them. Carla, did I get them all? I think I know what you were asking about. It's basically those ones where is it if you get it on the first day or you don't. Okay, great. I feel like I'm talking in circles a little bit, but so do we track 3-year re-eval dates in indicator 11? So no, not for public kids. So you're probably getting into something more along the lines of your proportionate share kids. And that's where Fund N is used for indicators. So if you have Fund N kids in your system now that you did their initials on and they're eligible, but didn't receive services for whatever reason, you carry those kids for 3 years. At the end of 3 years, you're supposed to do their 3-year re-eval along with their timely and meaningful and a lot of other things. But 3-year re-evals, when you're talking about that in relation to indicator 11, doesn't really have anything to do with indicator 11 because, and that's why we kind of don't talk about it in this session, is because Fund N is used to pick up the indicator 11 data, very similar to how we do it with Fund U. But it also plays a huge role in proportionate share calculations for districts. So it's when they have kids that maybe they go to their parochial school for general ed and they've been evaluated, they're eligible, but for some reason they're not receiving services. And so those are Fund N kids, and they do have to keep track of them for 3 years. Is iStar really the mechanism for their tracking? I mean, you can, but I would say that's not the only place that, you know, those kids are, you know, need to be remembered, I guess I should say. So, okay. Any other questions? I'll wait a few minutes just to see if anybody has anything. Otherwise, if you need to get going, I will see you at the next session. I'm going to be adding some more trainings on some things that I think that we need um, this season, I guess I should say, this fall. Um, so keep your eyes peeled on the news briefing for some additions. Um, so I'm hoping those will really help some people with error corrections and things like that. So we're going to try to do a little bit more as far as the webinars go. So it looks like I'm through. It looks like I'm already scheduled through December, but I'm making additions. So if any of you are at IAASE tomorrow, actually Thursday, come see me. I will have a table by the door, right by the food. So come visit me. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So if you think of anything, please remember to reach out to us, email or call us, and we will be happy to help you. And I will see you at the next session. Thank you guys. Bye-bye.